In September 1992, Allan Kenley Matheson was one of hundreds of first-year students trying to adjust to life on campus at Acadia University. Just 3 weeks later, the 20-year-old from Glendale, Nova Scotia, disappeared and hasn't been heard from since. At the time, police found no sign of foul play. After a lengthy search that led only to dead ends, Matheson's file became a cold case. But after a recent review of his file, the RCMP decided to search again this weekend in these woods near Acadia. Along with the RCMP, a psychologist will be involved in the search. Ken Hill has worked with missing persons cases for 19 years and says often the missing person doesn't want to be found.
For whatever reason, financial, guilt, shame, whatever, the person has gone somewhere else and taken up a new life. And in this case, with a subject who has traveled many parts of the world, it's very possible that he could, in fact, done just that.
More than 25 RCMP officers will be here tomorrow, poking and prodding the forest floor looking for a clue, any clue that may help them solve Allan Kenley Matheson's strange disappearance more than 13 years ago. Erin Moore, CBC News, Wolfville.
He was the kind of person that if anybody was going to undertake, I guess, a personal experiment in disappearing, he might be a candidate.
He's missing because he ran away. That was my strong point of view, and still is.
There was one night I was here, Kayreen was home, living here for the summer from Acadia, working, and I got this phone call like in the middle of the night, around 4 o'clock. And, I was just awake instantly. And so I answered the phone, and this person was like, this voice said, "You don't want to talk to me. You don't want to talk to me." And, I just kept saying, "Who is this? Who is this?" Because I was trying to determine, I guess I did think it was Kenley, but I was trying to catch a note in the voice that, I would know the voice or who it was. But the voice was very, downtrodden, very low voice. Kayreen woke up instantly. She heard the phone call. The person then hung up.
Do you think that may have been Kenley?
I always thought it was Kenley, and it could have been. It's like, who knows?
Sometime after Kenley had disappeared, I was at Halifax International Airport, either picking somebody up or dropping somebody out. And the bar used to be right beside where you walked. And I was walking by and I just looked at a young fellow. He had his ball cap on backwards and he looked at me. And I took a couple of steps and then I guess some eerie feeling or something, I don't know. I turned around and I went back. The beer glass, there was only about a mouthful of beer out of it. There was nobody there. I went down to the other end of the airport, there was nobody there. And I went in the men's washroom and there was nobody there. So I never did see who the young fellow was.
At the time, did you think it may have been Kenley?
I thought at the time, and that's why I stopped and turned around. Because I looked at him and he looked at me. And then when I went back, I couldn't look at him. He left a full beer at the bar, and when I walked around the airport and I came back, the beer was still cold, so it wasn't poured long beforehand. So then, I don't know, being nosy, I walked outside and there was nobody outside either, so I don't know where this person disappeared.
Well, a year after Kenley had disappeared, I was still in college, and it was Monday, and a friend of mine that went to school with me said, "Oh, I saw somebody on the weekend that knows you." And I said, "Really? Who's that?" He said, he was in Halifax for the weekend.
I think it was around 2 o'clock in the morning. We ended up at the Palace, and so, I mean, we're college students. We're drinking, and we were standing in the lineup at the Palace for quite a while, probably a good 15 minutes, and then this gentleman behind me started talking to me, and we just got talking about Nova Scotia PEI, and he asked me what I was doing in Nova Scotia, and I said I was studying at King's Tech, Funeral Service Education. He said, "Oh, you may know my cousin Wendell McKinnon." And I said, "I do." I said, "He's taking the broadcasting course." And so that really started the conversation between him and I. He told me he was going to Acadia, and that he was just down in Halifax for the weekend, and he was just hopping from club to club like we were. We continued to talk just about things about Nova Scotia, nothing about him. He didn't give me a name. He was probably in the lineup with me for about 20 minutes. I turned to talk to my friend Colin, and when I turned around, he was gone. I scanned the crowd, and I looked in the street, and there was no sighting of him whatsoever, so it was just like he vanished. The Monday morning following that weekend that I was in Halifax, I ran into Wendell at coffee like we always did, and we just got talking. I said, "I was talking to your cousin over the weekend at the Palace."
And so I asked him, I said, who was this guy? He said he was your cousin, obviously. And I said, "Really?" And so I started thinking, who could that be? And I asked him to describe him, and he basically described Kenley.
He said, "What was his name?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what his name was." I said, "He never said." And I said, "I was having drinks, and we were just talking about Nova Scotia, and he mentioned Acadia, and that's about the end of the conversation."
This friend of mine wasn't aware that Kenley had gone missing at the time, but I said to him, "If I showed you a picture of this cousin of mine, would you recognize him?" And he thought he would, so I did.
He went to his locker and brought me a picture, and he said, "Is this him?" And I said, "Yes, it is him." And he said, "Well, he's been missing for a year. We had no idea where he is."
So that was about a year after the fact.
This is definitely the gentleman I was talking to at night. And this is Kenley Matheson. This is the gentleman I was talking to.
I'm Cindy McKinnon, and I live here in London, Ontario. So I'm distantly related to the family of Kenley who live in Cape Breton. I'm guessing it would have been 97. I know it was winter time. It was evening, and this young man came to the door of the house we lived in then, and he was canvassing for Greenpeace. It was cold, and I had him come in. It's a beautiful, beautiful young man with a lot of passion for what he was doing. I would have spent quite a bit of time with this guy who I gathered to be about mid-20s, darkish hair. I just recall these beautiful eyes, average height, slender build. I think there may have been some kind of cap on his head. I just remember him being lovely, just lovely to look at, and enjoying the combination of how beautiful he was as a young man with such passion. The thing I think I remember the most about that day, I don't usually invite canvassers who come to my door in, for one thing. I don't usually spend 20 minutes to 30 minutes even in my foyer talking to people about something that up to that point hasn't been of interest to me. So when I look back on that day, what strikes me the most is it was a moment in time of meeting an individual who is so caught up in what they're doing at that moment, and so passionate about what they're doing, and so knowledgeable at a young age about what they're doing, that I thought it was a special person. I went to Cape Breton with my husband to visit family in the summer of '98, and we were staying, as we usually do, we stayed with the relatives in their homes, and so we were staying with Brian's aunt and uncle, Harvey and Laura, and so we were in their home, and we were probably staying with them for 2 or 3 nights before we moved on elsewhere. So in that period of time, you know, you're chatting with the family a fair bit, you're noticing knickknacks and things. So at some point in this visit with them, I was paying attention to all the photographs on the walls, the family photograph, and of course being from the other side of the family, I don't know who's who. And this particular photograph that was on the wall with several photographs kind of jumped out at me. And I remember thinking, I think I know that guy, but where do I know that guy? He looks awfully familiar. And so I said to Aunt Laura in her dining area, I said, Aunt Laura, who's that guy? And she said, oh, well, that's my nephew. Why do you ask? You know, and I said, well, I feel like I know him. I feel like I've met him. And she got a really strange look on her face. And she said, well, that is surprising because he is a missing person. So are you sure that you've met him? I said, no, I'm not sure, but I really have a strong feeling that I have met him. And I think he's a young man that came to our door canvassing for Greenpeace. This was the first time I'd ever heard about her side of the family and that there was a missing person on her side of the family. I also would like to share that I was having, aside from the sort of feeling like I'd met this person in real time and space, I was having sort of more like a spiritual or psychic or whatever kind of feeling welling up in me, to the point where I remember crying when I saw his picture. I remember being terribly moved, and at that point didn't know any backstory. And I remember having a sense, and I don't know if it was that night or sometime after, but I remember having this sense, almost like a dream, but I think it was a daydream, not a nighttime dream, that this individual was near water. And I don't know why, but I do remember having this sense at the time that I needed to follow this up. She decided to give me a copy of the picture to take back home with me. So when I left with the picture. There was a Greenpeace office on Richmond Street in London at that time. So I went into their office, and there was only like a receptionist, secretary type person there to speak with. And I just asked her if I could have a moment of her time, or if there's anybody I could speak with. And I said, I have a photo I'd like to show you. I said, we're trying to find this young man. And I said, I just need to know, I'm pretty sure he's somebody who came to my door. She took the photo and she looked at it and she said to me, yes, I believe this individual has worked for us. And she did tell me, she said, you know, a lot of young people canvass for us that are very transient. So people come and people go. And she said, all I can confirm for you is, yes, he does look like someone who has worked for us, but I cannot tell you anything more than that. As again, there must have been something in her tone that would suggest to me that she wasn't 100% sure. But even if she wasn't going to tell me.
He talked about marine biology, like university sciences, and I think for a career he would have been very happy to have traveled around and examined marine ecosystems. I think that would have been his dream.
I can easily picture Kenley working in Greenpeace on a boat somewhere to save stuff like whales and trees, and see, that was his thing. That was his passion.
I think he did, you know, one of the main reasons he would have taken off would have been, wanting to get back and get on sort of life's adventure, merry-go-round, you know, something more exciting. Than being stuck in a college town.
I could see that a very clearly delineated sort of cause, married with a sense of the adventure and sort of provocative nature of some of Greenpeace's antics to actually sort of intervene in areas that they don't agree with, would appeal to him.
I do think that he was highly interested in environmental issues. But I don't think he would have just picked up and left Acadia, you know, to join Greenpeace.
And I can't imagine with the close relationship he had with Kyrene and the kind of guy he was that he would want to just disappear. I know there are people who do that deliberately, and they don't tell anybody, and for years and decades. But I can't imagine that he would have done that to his family.
I mean, maybe I have heard about Kenley. Maybe that was one of the things that he mentioned. Over a few beer one night when he was back.
I can't remember him ever talking about Greenpeace.
The only thing that doesn't make sense to me about Kenley wanting to join Greenpeace is Kenley was not a joiner.
I would have been a little surprised if he would join an organization like Greenpeace because of the conformity that would have been involved. I think he's, from what I saw, he was very much a free agent.
Kenley being alive, yes, I imagine that. He could still land on my doorstep someday. That's definitely still a possibility in my mind, but a very slim possibility at this point in time.
I really hope he's still alive. I really do.
My gut is telling me that he is out there somewhere, still alive.
Sometimes I think he might still be alive.
I hope he's in Ecuador, in a bar, running a bar somewhere. And just, you know, with a nice local and tourist clientele having a good life.
To date, there has not been any credible sightings.
I think he's in Guatemala enjoying himself, working in the cornfield with a Guatemaltec family.
I hope that, you know, he's smoking a Havana, you know, living in life up in Cuba, drinking mojitos and living a good life, because, you know, I thought he was a good guy. I hope he's happy, and I'd like to think there's no, you know, bad end.
I would rather be ashes than dust.
I would rather my spark
Should burn out.
In a brilliant blaze.
Then it should be stifled in dry rot.
I would rather be a superb meteor.
Every atom of me.
In a magnificent glow.
than a sleepy, impermanent planet.
Man's chief purpose is to live, not to exist.
I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them.
I shall use my time.
I think when someone is missing and the collective urges for an answer, you start pointing fingers at things in people's experiences and impose a narrative when in fact, any number of things could have happened to Kenley that were specific to a context that occurred in the space of 24 hours.
The thing that makes historic cases so unique is time, obviously. Time can be your best friend or it could be your worst enemy. What happens with time is people start to forget, but they also start to not care as much.
I think it was on Monday or Tuesday. I hadn't seen him, and that was sort of unheard of, really, at that point. You know, even just seeing him walking along the pathway, my residence was right in front of his residence, so you'd often see him walking down the pathway or whatever, and not even running into him during school, and I thought that was rather strange. And so I brought it up to Tom again and said, "Have you seen Kenley?" And Tom is like, "No, I haven't seen him." And again, they lived on the same floor, so that seemed unlikely to me. And so I remember going to the RA at the time and just saying, you know, I have some concern. I'm wondering where my friend is. I haven't seen him for some time. And they took me upstairs and to his room, and we checked his room. And what stood out for me out of that particular moment was that his knapsack was still there. And to me, that just seemed rather out of place. Yeah, I didn't know the guy very well, but that knapsack went everywhere with him. It was, it was very much a part of him. And to just see that knapsack there, it just seemed that still to me seems very out of place, that would just be left there.
When I came in on the Wednesday and, just my scan of the room, I do remember seeing the books and, seeing his bed kind of unmade as if someone had just, left the bed, the clothes, the toiletries and everything on the counter. And then I know that he had his backpack, that was in the room, but his book backpack, from what I remember, was not in the room. I do know it didn't come home because I was pretty aware of a lot of the stuff that did come home. Like I know his other, his traveling backpack, the one that he used to, travel all over the place, was still with all of his stuff. So the black and red one did not come back.
The room seemed organized. It wasn't, there's books on the table, stuff like that. I can't remember seeing the backpack there that day. I can't. I'd like to say the last time he was missing, I believe he said he was carrying a knapsack.
The black backpack, I recall, or from my notes that I read in my notebook, is from what the witness had said he'd seen him with downtown.
So you don't recall it being in the room?
No, I don't.
According to the statements and all the documentation that I reviewed regarding Kenley's case, the Wolfville police file, timeline, interviews, any type of documentation. There was absolutely no indication whatsoever that somebody or anybody had been in that room between Sunday at 9-ish when the RA was there Sunday night and Wednesday when Kayreen entered the room.
Yes, I believe that Kenley's sister and the resident assistant were the first people to enter the room.
I hadn't seen him since Friday, right? So at this point, it's now getting into the school week and he's not participating in classes. We're not seeing him on campus. And so, yeah, so I think it was Tom and I that, we had spoke about it, and Tom had said, he maybe had felt a bit of concern as well. So we went and approached Todd Barker, who was the RA at the time, on tower on the 9th floor, and expressed our concern to him as well. And, he took us very seriously and, went through, the proper channels to get us access to his room so that we could at least just have a look in there. And he opened up the door, and all you saw in that room really was just Kenley's knapsack. That, to me, just sticks out the most. As soon as he opened up the door and the knapsack is just sitting there beside his bed. Like I say, that knapsack is, was like his man purse. It had his personal things in there. He always had that. So for him not to take that, it just seems just very out of place to me.
According to Kirsten, you guys were the first ones being so close to Kenley that really noticed that he had gone missing. And she said that you guys approached Todd Barker, the RA, about Kenley. Is that true?
I can't remember approaching Todd Barker about him. May have been, yeah. Yeah, I can't remember.
Did you and Kirsten and Todd Barker go in Kenley's room?
No.
Speaking of Kayreen, as you remembered it when I talked to you last time, you were saying that she was the first indication to you that something was amiss.
Yeah, she came and sought me out because she said she hadn't seen him. The room was as if he had just left and that he was coming back. His book bag was there. His sister checked to see if his clothes were there. His clothes were there. There were some textbooks on his desk, if I recall.
Yeah, I think it was the first time that Todd had heard about it. He seemed, just as shocked as we were, that he hadn't seen Kenley. So I think he took that to be quite serious.
Kirsten has a memory of you guys going in there.
Yeah? I can't remember that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he would have had the authority to go into another room. I don't know. I simply can't remember that at all. I certainly haven't written it down because I've had a good look through. I haven't written down that I went into his room with Todd Barker.
So there's no opportunity for anybody else to get in there, as far as you know.
No, because they would have locked. They would have locked it. I had a key, but I was told not to go back into that room. I would not have gone in his room for any reasons other than that day when she came out. I'm responsible as a key holder, that I have a master key that I can open up people's rooms. I couldn't violate people's trust by opening up rooms for people, whimsily. But I will tell you one thing. There was guys in the building who knew, they could have been safe crackers, knew how to jimmy doors open. The master key was useless because there were guys who knew how to jimmy those locks with butter knives.
Kroll Tower was very easily to break into as far as rooms. All you had to do was have 2 knives and prop the door open and you're in.
I think some people were into his room after he went missing. I believe that wholeheartedly.
If it were a situation where the accounts of those people involved who gave statements to Wolfville police, the resident assistant, friends of Kenley's, if it were a situation where one of those people had been in that room prior to that initial time that Kayreen and Todd Barker go into that room, and yet there's nothing in the statements or files about it, what might that indicate?
Okay, sorry, can you repeat that?
If it were discovered that the RA, others from the 9th floor, for example, Tom Gordon and or Kirsten Tomlinson, were in that room between Sunday and Wednesday night when Kayreen went in there, and yet there's nothing about that in any of their statements, what might that indicate?
That, to me, if any of those people that were persons of interest, if it was discovered that they were definitively in that room between Monday and Wednesday, to me that would be another red flag, but that would be a very big red flag.
Again, that knapsack just like it just stood out. Who goes somewhere without, you know, their belongings? You know, that I think his wallet was in there. That's all I see is, you know, as I'm recalling this to you now, just seeing, you know, as they opened up the door and then having that moment of clarity where it's like, wow, why is that knapsack just sitting there?
I can't speculate on what it might mean if someone had entered the room before Kenley's sister and the RA, but certainly if that were the case, I would be very interested to receive that information, and I would follow it up thoroughly.
It's that knapsack. That knapsack just doesn't make any sense. That's the foreboding feeling I had. And that's what I always, you know, ended up coming back to in terms of, you know, where did he go?
To learn if one of those or all of those persons of interest were actually into that room without authorization, without reason, that to our knowledge, between Sunday and Wednesday, when Kayreen went in, that would be of great importance to me as an investigator.
Yeah, might take me a little while to find it, sorry. Shall I take a little break or?
No, it's okay. I think it was on the Wednesday, where
The Wednesday after?
you and Kirsten, yeah, it must have been the 23rd. You guys
Okay.
drive to New Minas to drop off some film. I don't know.
Oh, there we go, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You're right. Yeah, 23rd of September. Kirsten and I discussed, do you want me to read this out?
Hold on one sec.
Okay. So yeah, on the 23rd of September, Kirsten and I appeared to discuss this for the first time, and it just says here, Kirsten and I discussed the disappearance of Ken. He hasn't been seen for days. His sister thinks he's just taken off somewhere. Which is what I think the initial reaction, if you think first of Kirsten and myself, that's I think what we thought, certainly what I thought.
So you and Kirsten, you're down in New Minas on Wednesday afternoon. Why were you guys down there? Why were you in New Minas?
I think I was getting a camera film developed.
Did you read the parts on that 23rd on the Wednesday where you and Kirsten are discussing
I did.
sort of the lead up and then?
Because I read the first two bits about us talking.
Okay.
I said, Kirsten, I did, okay, but I'll do it again. I'll do it again, no problem.
Maybe start with like the drive out there or whatever, or.
So on the 23rd of September is when it seems from the diary the first conversation comes up about Kenley. We drove, it says here, to New Minas to drop off a film to get developed. And it says here, Kirsten and I discussed the disappearance of Ken. He hasn't been seen for days. His sister thinks he's just taken off somewhere. And I later write, all I can say is I hope Ken's all right.
Just one thing back to the journal, you know, on the 24th, on the Thursday, sort of around the time that all this is going down, you wrote that you caused a stir by flying off the handle. What happened?
I can't remember. I remember reading that in the diary again. But I literally cannot remember what it was. But, you know, these things, you know, happen. I've been away from home for a long while by then. You know, I've been away for something like a month and a half, and everything was totally new, you know. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything too serious. There were little fallouts between people at points on the 9th floor, but none of them were ever too serious.
The
the girl that they spend the weekend in Corkham's on, I remember she came into the office and she had Kenley's hat, the hat apparently he was wearing when he went missing.
In early '93, you gave the Wolfville Police Department, Constable McKillop, I guess, Kenley's baseball cap.
I did?
That he had left on Corkham's Island. Apparently. How did that come about?
I don't even remember that. Wow. His baseball cap. He didn't even have his baseball cap. I don't remember. I don't remember that. Wow. Yeah, that doesn't stand out for me at all.
She said the hat, she just said, well, Kenley Matheson left the hat there that weekend. The weekend he was down there. But they say he might have been missing last seen wearing that hat.
What was his trademark hat?
I can't remember. We'll have to find out from the photo, but so we might have to redo that. Yeah, sorry. But I can. It was always, like you have with the brim, turned in, and he always had the same hat, but I can't picture what was on it.
Do you remember Kenley leaving his hat at Corkham's and Kirsten returning it to the Wolfville Police Department, several months later? Does that ring a bell at all?
It does ring a bell. Do you mean the baseball cap?
Yeah.
It does ring a bell that he left it behind somewhere. But I can't remember how or why he left it behind. But then I didn't know that she'd returned it to Wolfville Police, no.
And that played on my mind for a while. That still bothers me about the hat.
And I just remember him waving and wearing his trademark cap. Although are you saying that his cap was left in Corkham's Island, right?
And to me, when I think Tom Gordon last saw him, his description was to a T. Person you walk past a person, you don't remember just like that when he's wearing. But his description's right down, to a T. His hat, the clothes, and everything.
Well, Tom Gordon, he did have some details on when he saw Kenley last. And, they were good friends and, he observed him supposedly downtown on Main Street walking near the gym, which would be away from the downtown area going towards Nolan's Canteen. And he actually mentioned that in a statement that he saw him walking towards Nolan's Canteen. Well, Nolan's Canteen is known where the bus line is. And so he gave the indication that, Kenley was walking towards Nolan's Canteen, which would make you think, he's walking towards the bus station.
So, Tom, this is really interesting for me because it's sort of different even than what I expected, because some of the stuff I've read and when people talk about the last sighting, there are some that have you seen him sort of walking toward Nolan's Canteen, like down by the athletic center. Does that make any sense?
My memory, certainly being back here, is coming back, it's bringing it back a little clearer. My memory is definitely of seeing him here on Main Street.
Initially, Tom Gordon seemed kind of, as I remember back, he cooperated, but he wasn't really, felt like he was hiding something.
My memory is not of seeing him heading towards any kind of bus stop, like a bus depot called Nolan's Canteen. My memory is of seeing him here on Main Street, and as I recall it, him coming the other way, heading into town.
Some of the conventional wisdom is that you had seen him twice that day, which doesn't quite make sense either. That you saw him at the ATM, and then you saw him again. So,
not that I remember.
You recall, you only saw him one time that day.
As I recall it, I only saw him the one time during that day, and that would be down here on Main Street. If I reread the diary and if I think back to that day, I can't recall seeing him a second time.
The same individual who was reporting Kenley at an ATM on Monday is the same individual that's reporting him leaving town, walking out of town on Monday, walking with some type of a knapsack and a hat or whatever was mentioned on the posters. I do not believe, as an investigator, that was factual.
So that the Sunday, the last day that I saw him, I always feel like that was the day that he disappeared. And the timeline, I mean, to me just works out because I saw him at 4 o'clock, and then the next day at 8:30, he didn't go to class. He didn't go to his chemistry class. Tuesday, he didn't go to his calculus class. Monday night, he didn't meet me for studying for calculus, to do our calculus homework. Who saw him Monday? Where was he Monday?
Where were you that Sunday night?
Sunday night, I went. Sunday night, it says I went here with some friends to the chapel service on the campus. I can't remember anything about it, but it was probably the case that some people were going and I went along.
Was Kenley around that Sunday?
I can't remember Kenley being around that Sunday, but again, it would have appeared in my diary, or I would remember if it had been strange. Like I say, people from the 9th floor, you saw them, and you didn't see them. They were around, they were not around. So it didn't strike me as strange. I mean, he probably not noted that I saw him if I saw him, because it was just on the floor or whatever.
Well, when the police asked Tom Gordon where, I'm not sure exactly the questioning, but where do you think, or what, where do you think Kenley is, or do you know where he is? And he said, check South America. And then he was one of the last people to see him, and he states that he saw him walking towards Nolan's canteen. So this could have been like a major reason why the police and other people, lumped that into him just taking off.
This person who reported seeing Kenley last, yes, that in and of itself would certainly, in my books, make him a person of interest. No question about it. Being asked, by Wolfville Town Police, where do you think he is, and having a response, South America. I mean, that is so far out in left field. That statement alone is going to attract my attention. No question about it.
So there were a few things surrounding that time that I feel like the police, should have been a little more suspicious of, especially the last sighting that someone had of a person, that to really okay, let's completely figure this timeline out and find reasoning for it and find backup for it and find witnesses that show that this person was telling the truth.
It's funny, I was thinking about that the other day. I said, the last person, now that you mentioned Tom Gordon's son, I said, well, that person makes something like that up. In my mind, I kind of played on me that maybe he would. He did something to Kenley, and the trace, made up the story that I saw Kenley at the bank and at Main Street. That's still in my mind. That's a possibility that could happen.
What was the nature of your relationship with Kirsten? Was it romantic? Was it platonic? Were you interested? Was she interested?
The relationship with Kirsten, and I had to look back a lot in the diary to try and refresh all this. And looking back, there's a lot of me writing about, is wondering if we were more than friends or just friends.
Maybe there was between Tom Gordon and the other girl, and Kenley Matheson, there might have been, that was brought to my attention by somebody, maybe there was a love triangle. Maybe Tom Gordon got jealous.
What about you and Tom?
No, me and Tom never ever got together either. No, a little too dorky for me. That was such a goofy question. Tom, yeah, no.
But I remember we went to the tower party and then ended up sort of sleeping in the same bed. And then we sort of agreed that, we were going to be friends. I think of looking back, and this might be a guy thing, I was probably more into it than she was. And I think if I remember rightly, she said to just be friends.
And I believe I asked Tom Gordon about that, and he denied. He said, no, there's nothing, we're just friends, he said, that, 3 of them.
And I know that, like Tom, he has followed the story over the years, and he reached out to me on Facebook, and we messaged back and forth, and he has shown interest, like even contacting the RCMP afterwards. It's really hard to say whether, that's just from a crazy thing that happened at a very crucial time in his life. He just moved to a new country, and basically, like, probably his new best friend goes missing. So that, it's hard to say whether that's just always been, like a sore spot for him where he was really impacted by that event. I mean, of course, the other side is like he's trying to keep track of things and, making sure that, like if he ever was involved in anything with Kenley's disappearance, that he's aware of it.
Actually, there was two times that person injected themselves back into the investigation. One was to the phrases used I found very strange. One was there have you found any proof that Kenley was dead? That I find very intriguing. That type of statement. Have you found any proof as to where Kenley is? Have you found any proof that Kenley's alive? Anything new on Kenley's case? No, that's not the question that was posed. What was posed is, have you found any proof that Kenley was dead?
If Tom Gordon were involved and he wanted to prove that Kenley was around on Main Street on Monday, might he go into the bank and can deposit something in Kenley's account to have a bank record to match the story he's telling?
That makes perfect sense to me. I mean, that's if he had something to do with Kenley Matheson's death, Tom Gordon, and he had his bank card. He would put it back, and that would verify his story.
Do you know what happened to Kenley?
Unfortunately, I have no idea what happened to Kenley Matheson. I wish I did. I wish I had some kind of answer. I wish I could give some kind of clue or some kind of indication. But it's a tragedy and a mystery that someone that seemed to be so happy, although he'd given up a few things, some of the adventure and incredible things he'd been doing and places he'd been to come and study back in his home province of Nova Scotia in a small, college town of Wolfville. He seemed happy. He seemed, in the time I knew him, to be making the most of it, if you like, trying to experience what he could and throwing himself into it. And yeah, the sad thing is I have absolutely no idea what happened, and I wish I did. I wish I could give his family some kind of closure. I wish I could help.
Were you involved in his disappearance?
I wasn't involved in any way in his disappearance, and I wish I could offer some kind of, positive answer to the whole thing.
When was the last time that you talked to Tom Gordon?
Yeah, it would have been when, in what year is it? 1998? Where are we? What year are we? 2002, right? Is that where we are? What year are we?
92.
92. Was it 92?
September of 92.
Wow, 92. Now, why have I got my dates all fucked up? Oh, okay, yeah, 92, 93 would... Okay, yeah. Okay. So, the last time I would have seen Tom was in 92, when he left Acadia. But again, that doesn't really stand out for me.
Do you know anything about Kenley's disappearance?
I know nothing. Yeah, just what I've told you. Yeah, I know nothing.
Do you know anything about Kenley's death? Were you involved in his death?
Well, we don't know that he's dead. So, no, I've absolutely no knowledge of anything that happened to him after the last time I saw him or he was seen on campus, living what seemed to be a happy life.
Did you remove his backpack from his dorm room?
No, I didn't remove anything from his dorm room. Especially not his backpack.
Did something happen that September that you are covering up?
I can't think of anything negative or bad that happened in that September 92. that I or we or people in some way are covering up.
He went into the diner, this is Walton Diner, to eat. Came back out to the car, stared at the lake, went back into the convenience store. Came back out again, and he's been sitting in his car for 20 minutes. Also, one other time he got out and he kept staring at the lake, not taking pictures, not smoking, just staring. So we're just waiting for him to leave the premises and follow him again. We're currently in Walton.
I am Kayreen Willis, and I'm Kenley Matheson's sister. And just a couple of days ago, I heard my mom say the words that I never thought I would ever hear in my lifetime. And she said, "I think we may have found Kenley."